The pleasure of the LHS to present this interview with Herb Knox as part of our Living History series. As many of you are aware, Herb was born, raised, and educated in Lakefield. He spent his life career in teaching, starting in the one-room school and culminating as the instrumental consultant with the Durham Region Board of Education in Oshawa. Herb has a passion for music. He's been playing professionally in all styles of bands for more than 65 years. His choice of instruments are the tenor and soprano saxophones, the clarinet, and as well he does a fine job on vocals. He's had great success with his gift and love for the teaching of music. At his Central Collegiate School in Oshawa, he formed a Dixieland band. They won the Canadian Stage Band Festival not once, but 4 years in a row. As we hear of his journey, let us welcome Herb Knox back to his hometown.
Podium is yours, Herb. Would you like me to move it over there? Or?
I think we'll just, I'll be that Herb and I just sit here and have a chat.
All right.
Be all right?
That would be great. You can use those microphones right there. I'll shut this.
Probably wind up like Coach's Corner with two.
Yeah. Okay, Donnie, you got the hair for it. Anyhow.
Why do you think I wore this shirt?
We people in Lakefield, we're very partial to Lakefield boys. And we're really happy when anyone from Lakefield does well. And Herb is an example of a Lakefield boy, true and true, has gone to larger fields, done very well. And we're going to talk with him this evening and share many of his varied experiences. First, I'd like to maybe deal a bit with your beginnings here in Lakefield, Herb, and your family. Where were you born?
24 Dean Street.
24 Dean Street, and that's, who were your parents?
My mother was Stella Lennox, and she grew up here in Lakefield, and my dad was Jay Knox.
Can you hear back there?
Can you hear me?
Okay. We have microphones there. Just speak into that.
See, he's starting already. Turn the sucker up. All right. No. That's good. No.
Okay. Yeah.
Right there. Check one. No.
Careful with
Can you hear me with this? You can hear me just as well this way, can't you?
Sure. Okay.
No.
Can we turn it up? Check one. There we are. Yeah, yeah. And a little more trouble. It's a good thing I wore my tight shorts. Anyway, where was I?
Well, you were telling us about.
Oh, never mind. Never mind. I'll do it. My dad was born in Havelock, and later on they moved to Peterborough. And my grandfather Knox was when he became the superintendent of the Trent Canals, and so they moved there and lived there until Dad got married, and then to Mother, and I guess that's who they were. Anyway, they lived most of the rest of our lives. We lived in Lakefield here. Now, what else do you want to?
Well,
Oh, I had a brother, Greg. Yeah.
Herb, when were you born? What year?
29.
I've been told by another Lakefield resident, Percy Calbury, he claims that you and he are twins. But you say you were born a day apart.
That's a lie. I'm 1 day older than Percy.
Yeah. Well, you're certainly not identical twins because the only thing similar is the hairline. But
well, you can't have hair and brains both.
Herb, you have siblings. You have a brother, I believe.
Yep, Greg. Greg was 2 years and 2 months older than me.
Yeah, and what children do you have?
I have 3 children who are still around. My oldest daughter, Suzanne, and her husband just moved back to Stony Lake, and they have some property up there. And right now they just bought up near Viamede, and they still own 318 feet on one of the islands out from Gilchrist Bay there. So, and they say they're going to keep them both, so.
Okay.
They'll live out in the island in the summer and on shore in the winter.
Yeah. I heard when you were growing up in Lakefield, your family, were you active in any of our churches?
Yeah, I was, went to Sunday school in, United Church, and actually, that's where I sang my first solo. And it was at the Christmas concert in 1936, and my mother, Stella, was a very fine piano player, and so I sang "It Came Upon a Midnight Clear," and that was for the Christmas concert. But I'm lying. That wasn't the first solo in that church. My grandmother Lennox was very sick with cancer, and we moved in with them over here on 42 Dean way back, about 1933. And of course, we were dragged to Sunday school. Sometimes my mother was, she was the one that sat in when Mrs. Grills couldn't play the piano. And my dad was sometimes the superintendent, but anyway, they dragged me in, and there was a 78 record that my dad used to play in, and there were two songs that I liked in it. And one was needles and pins, when a man marries his trouble begins. The other one was 11 more months and 10 more days be out of the calaboose. 11 more months and 10 more days are gonna turn me loose. So I got up there singing, and everybody's singing "Jesus Loves Me," and I didn't know that song, so I started bellowing out 11 and on. And so they stopped everybody and told me that I had to sing "Jesus Loves Me." Well, I didn't know that, but I learned it anyway.
Yeah. Herb, I'm going to make a suggestion. Instead of you and I shouting back and forth at each other, could you and Derry change places?
You know the road, Derry.
Yeah.
I'll take my water with me.
Sure. Yeah.
Do you really believe this was water, Andy?
As you were growing up in the village, I believe you were fortunate in that you're, well, not this close. I believe you were fortunate enough that your grandparents lived directly across the road from you, did they not?
No, that was my Uncle Ira.
Oh, that was your uncle?
Yeah, and he could play, he could chord on the piano, and he's a very good singer, and he loved to whistle. This is what I remember a lot about him, is that he, everywhere he went, he whistled. He seemed to be a very, very happy man.
And what was his name?
Ira.
Ira Lennox?
Yeah, Ira Lennox.
And was he Bob's father?
Yeah, yes, Bob Jr. My grandfather Lennox was Bob.
Okay.
Yeah, and his family, there were 7 in the family, and they lived up, if you know where it is, on the 4th line of Dummer, and they could all, there were 7 boys in the family, they could all play the violin.
South of Bethel Church on the 4th line of Dummer?
No, it wouldn't be Bethel's church, it was Hall's Glen.
Yeah, pardon me, yeah, Zion.
And
Yeah.
to the east there. And they had one fiddle, and my mother always talked about them going there, and they'd move all the furniture outside, and they'd dance, and the 7 boys would stand in a circle, and they'd step dance and pass the fiddle from one to the other. And apparently they could, one could play the finger the fiddle, and the other one would bow it at the same time. Anyway, so, you know, my roots are, I guess, in music. My mother was a very good piano player. She was a backup piano player for the old theater, which is down on this side of Leonard's Hardware. You know what I mean? And if the piano player was Bob Brown's oldest brother, Herrick, and when he couldn't make it, Mother would go down, and she must have been a very good sight reader, because they, I don't know whether you know much about it, before they had the talkie movies, they used to send a piano score, and then while they played the movie, the piano player would play the score along with it. So you had to kind of watch the music and watch the movie to keep everything going right, because sometimes you'd be playing fast and sometimes you'd slow down. And my dad was, he didn't play fiddle, he played violin. And he played in the chamber orchestra in Peterborough, and it was run by a gentleman by the name of Glidden. And that's about all I know about that. Although he could play any brass instrument, any valve brass instrument. And he used to play either baritone horn, or he had a little silver cornet that he would play in the Lakefield Citizens Band. You want to talk about the Lakefield Citizens Band?
Well, you might as well give us a shot.
Okay. This is, again, you know, sometimes we forget, or things change over the years, so I'm going to say as I remember, okay? So me, and if you think I'm lying, that's fine, but I don't care. The Lakefield Citizens Band used to get together once a year. As I remember, they would play the November the 11th, and there was the, if you remember, the cenotaph is still there, but there was also like a gazebo, which was a bandstand. And there were a number of the people from Lakefield that played in that band, and it was led by Mr. Medill, who was a tinsmith. He played trombone. Let me see who else. Oh, Moses Marsden played the tuba. You remember, had the house, the cobblestone house up by the school? And let me see who else. The fire chief, what was his name? Clark.
Alan Clark.
Alan Clark played baritone horn.
Was Truman Jewell not in that orchestra?
Truman Jewell, he was a character. He was a really, really good trumpet player, and he would say to some of us younger guys, never played a wrong note in my life. And I can't say that.
Yeah. Herb, when you're growing up in Lakefield, do you remember where you did your shopping? Any favorite store? Or?
Well, Spence's,
Okay.
which is now an office. I worked for T.C. Young for a number of years and delivered groceries every day after school and Saturday, and rode the bicycle even in the winter, and got $2.50 a week.
Yeah. I worked for them too,
Big
and they said they never had as fine a delivery boy as me.
Is that weird?
Yeah.
Oh, they were lying. Now, a word about Mr. Young. He was a real gentleman, I'll tell you. He was, I was there one time and sitting there, and this young couple come in, and apparently they had a mortgage with them, and they said, well, we can pay the interest, but we can't pay any of the principal this year. And he had the mortgage in his hand, and he slapped it a couple of times and said, here, burn it. He said, you paid me more in interest than the mortgage is worth. Now, to me, there's a real Christian. You know, yeah.
No.
And of course, Grace was she was the secretary of the school board.
Correct. Yeah. Where did you buy your meat? Do you remember where you buy your meat?
Yeah.
TC didn't sell meat.
Well, Teddy Crawford's at first,
Okay.
and then Harold Hamlin took over,
Right.
and
Lenny
then,
was there, but
then Leonard after that. Where's Leonard? Back there, yeah.
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 Okay.
Yeah.
And did you buy any clothing in Lakefield? Do you remember?
Well, not a lot. Theodore Crawford's had the clothing store down there, and it's the little building that's right next to the
Al's Barber Shop now.
the Hamlin's, whatever it is, yeah.
Yeah.
And but mostly Stella took us to Peterborough every fall, and we got a new suit so that we could go to church. And of course, we were growing boys, so we had to get a new suit every year. And I always remembered I was totally cheesed off because I had to wear knickers until I was 12.
Yeah.
Couldn't wear long pants until you were 12.
Yeah. Let's talk about your education, Herb. You're a graduate of Lakefield Public and High School. Who was your first public school teacher?
First, when I started at Lakefield Public School, there was no kindergarten. So Miss Kidd, Elsie Kidd, taught grade 1. You could start in September or after New Year's in January or after Easter. So a lot of us started after Easter, and we were 3 months in Miss Kidd's room, and then we went back to Miss Kidd's room. And years ago, when I was the vice principal here, one of my jobs was to look up people who were trying to get their old age pension, and they had to have something to certify their age. And so you look through the old registers, and you know that the registers went back, way back to 1884. They were down in the basement and dustier than the devil, but anyway, I was looking up somebody one day, and I decided I'd look this up, and I never knew this. I didn't remember this, but I was 13 months in grade 1. I guess that's why I'm so smart. Well, actually, there were a number of us, since the school was growing, there were a number of us that they just put us from grade 1 into grade 3. And let me think. Jesse Wong.
Oh, yeah.
Willie Corby. Of course, Willie Corby and Bruce Dureshi and I used to walk down the road or down the street every day there, and we dally because grade 1s were let out 15 minutes early, and we used to mess around every 15 minutes to watch the fights on every day. And then the older guys would always, on the way home, there'd be a fight, and we wanted to watch it. But, anyway.
In my day, the battleground was at the swamp drain down there. Was it there when you were that same venue, eh? Yeah, I gave a lot of blood there. That's where I first started to donate. Herb, who were your friends? You mentioned a couple there. Who were your school friends, as you recall?
I don't know whether I had any friends.
Was that Keith Montgomery? Was he going to school then?
Oh yeah, Keith was there. He was a year ahead of me or something like that, Keith.
I was a year younger too.
Yeah. Yeah, but don't forget, Monty, he spent 13 months in grade 1.
Didn't I tell you? Everybody lies. Anyway, the close friends were Joe Sabatino over here and Tommy Birch and I. We seemed to be together all the time when we were kids, and we played hockey together and played in the football team. And maybe you'd be interested to know that with George Kelly, Joe and Tom and I sang in a male quartet, and it was run by old Mr. Reynolds. You remember him? He came every week, and he got us singing, and we were in grade 9. And you know that the first year they had the Kiwanis Festival in Peterborough, we went to it and we won. Oh. So that tells you about the caliber of Joe Sabatino. Now, we're not going to talk about a certain person in the room here that only sang one note.
But you can give us a hint. What would the name be?
No, I don't want to embarrass him.
Okay. Well, I tell you, if he was a Wasson boy, that was par for the family. We were one-noters. Yeah, and then we were off-key on that one.
Well, you know, there's a difference, you know, between that singing out of tune and only singing one note. And it's well known that now that boys, when their voices change, they only sing one note, and it's around C or C sharp. That's where they sing. So they'll sing God save our gracious Queen Mother. And so Dr. Bell wrote 2 songs that had the tenor part where all he sang was one note. So these kids, I had a 4-piece choir of grade 8s in Oshawa, and we sang these 2 songs, and the kids where voices were changing, they just sang the one note all the time, and it just sounded great because the way that the doctor had constructed the music. Everybody else sang, the boys could sing bass and the treble and the alto, but tenor all one note, and it just worked out great.
Herb, how were you on the tonette? How many of you people remember playing the tonette in school?
Yeah.
How were you on that?
Well, you know, that was started, of course, by my father-in-law, Mr. Sloan, and I have to say he's probably the best teacher that I can remember. And he did a lot for us in music and sports and everything here, you know. But anyway, he got us playing the tonette. Now, the tonette uses the same 6 fingerings as certain other instruments. For instance, the flute and the saxophone, and certain what should I say, pitches on the clarinet. And we'll come around to that later.
Okay, Herb, you eventually, it was a long, hard ordeal, but you got to high school. Did you know that?
Yeah, I did. You know.
And who was your principal there?
Oh, Bob Sutton.
Okay.
Well, no, the first year, what was his name?
Mr. Harvey?
No. Oh no. I was scared to death of that man.
Okay.
Oh, Willie Corby and I were running down the bottom hall, and there's this giant, like he except he was green, he looked like the friendly green giant. He's up at the top there, and you boys settle down, you know.
Okay, after him was it Mr. Drury?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, I think he was only there 1 year. We were in grade 9.
Yeah. Well, we'll skip that one.
And then Bob Sutton came.
Yeah. So you went into high school. Did you were you in the Army Cadets?
Oh yeah.
Did they have a band?
Yeah.
You play in it?
Well, I wasn't going to lug one of those 14-pound rifles around. So some of us played in the we had a bugle band. Tommy Birch played bugle in it, and myself. I'm trying to think someone else. I got a picture of it somewhere. Jack Chittick played the drums, and there was another guy. And Jerry McCarthy was the drum major. He didn't play the drums. He just marched in front of us. But it was a pretty good bugle band if you like bugle bands.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was a lot easier than carrying a rifle. Although a lot of us that actually that played in the bugle band also played in that what movie? It was a group of us that did all sorts of things with the rifles and that. And Cameron your brother was the head of that.
Head of cadets, yeah. He was bossy around home too.
I bet you. And I'll tell you one thing, he could hit you a bad swat. He's a tough guy.
You don't need to go into too much detail on that with me. Herb, where did you, when you were a young kid, a teenager around Lakeville, what restaurants were here that you used to go to?
We used to go over to Herb Brown's. And then he also had the little refreshment booth at the old arena.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you could get a hot dog and a Coke for 10 cents.
Yeah.
So my grandfather Lennox used to give us, our weekly stipend was 10 cents each. And Greg would say, don't you do anything with that dime. And we'd go and who was it, George? It was
Pearson? No.
Yeah, and we
Or
went,
Charles.
and we went, you remember, it was a dime to get in and skate, but we tell George that we only had a dime, and he'd say, okay, boys, but you gotta help scrape the ice. And then we had a dime for a Coke and a hot dog.
Yeah, oh, that's, and where was the rink then that you're speaking of?
Well, it's over where the bowling alley is now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
On Colburn Street.
On Colburn
And
Street.
it was a joint rink. I think your father curled there too, did he not?
Oh, yeah, father and mother.
Yeah.
They
And it
didn't-
had two ice surface, did it not?
Yeah, yeah, they were, the one on the inside near the ice, the arena ice, it was pretty good, but the one on the other side, it was all crooked and everything, and nobody ever wanted to be over there. You had to have your own curling stones in those days.
Yeah.
So we still have Dad's. Originally, those curling stones weighed about 42 pounds, and originally the women used 36-pound stones. And there should be one hanging around down at the new curling rink, because Mother had them, and one got broken, and I left it down there, and they had it. I had it somewhere, but I don't know where it is now. Yeah. Anyway, and the women weren't allowed to, of course, curl until 1925. I think was that the year? Yeah.
That complex, there was two rinks. There was a curling rink, and right adjacent to it was the skating rink and the hockey rink. And the curling rink, as Herb says, had two ice surfaces.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the hockey rink, and it was built. I just come across that the other day, and I found it a matter of interest that was built in 1921. And it lasted until 1948, I believe, when we built the new one over here.
And I know where all the 9-inch beams are too. That came out of there. I bought them and used them to redo the place over on the North Shore. That's all those beams are up in the rec room. That's where they came from.
Was there a teen town when you were a teenager, Herb?
Oh yeah, there was a teen town.
Tell us a little bit about the teen town.
Well, it was just a teen town, and they
what was that, a drinking place, or
no, geez,
fighting,
no,
or
no, we didn't.
What was it used for?
Nobody drank in those days. And let's see, there was an executive. It was Tommy Birch and myself and Jack and Gina. I think you were on that executive, weren't you?
Dean,
Gene?
were you on the executive?
Are you listening, Jane? Wake up.
Oh, Gene.
Long year.
Okay.
Yeah, Haley Windsor kind of.
Yeah,
Remember Haley
yeah,
Yards?
yeah. He ran it, and we used to go down there and dance. Yeah,
Oh,
upstairs.
there was dancing there too, was there?
Oh, yes, there was indeed, yes, as I remember.
Yeah. I knew we'd get to that answer. That's all it was, dancing.
That's about it, yeah.
Yeah.
There wasn't much socializing, I'll tell you that, no.
Okay.
And
Well,
you know, half the time you're afraid to ask a girl for a dance because you're afraid you'd step on their toes or something like that.
yeah.
Although, you know, in the Second World War, we had the old pavilion up at the lake there, and all of the young gentlemen were in the Army or the Navy or the Air Force, and so the girls were left in that little pavilion that was down beside the hotel, and
You're talking about Stony Lake, right?
yeah, Stony Lake.
Oh, okay.
And so my cousin Sybil, better known as Birdie, and a whole bunch of the other ones, Maxine Lee and a bunch of them, and then they'd come down to dance, and then they'd grab us, and I'm 11 years old, and they're trying to teach me how to jive. And it's a little tough, you know, when you're trying to jive with some chick that's 4 feet older and taller than you.
Herb, would you tell us a little bit, most of these people would be interested in maybe had some experience with the high school band. How did you get started? Who encouraged it? What was it? Who was in it?
Well, of course it was a bugle band, but Bob
I don't think so. It was a dance band, wasn't
No,
it?
just a minute. Let me finish. Didn't I tell you? Just want to get this right. Anyway, some of us wanted to play in a dance band, and so Mr. Sutton, Bob, who played in a band, he could play piano and saxophone and the trumpet, which is a little strange because it's very hard to play a woodwind instrument and then go back to a brass instrument, embouchures. But anyway, he could handle it, and he started a dance band. Now, let me see. George Kelly played the piano. Tommy Birch and Greg and I and John Peel played trumpet. Jim Sloan, Charlie Ridpath, and Bill, what's his name? Come up on the third line there.
Bill Batten is
Bill
with us tonight,
Batten.
Mary. Yeah.
They played violins, and that was about it.
I think this gentleman was in it, was he not?
No, he wasn't.
John wasn't in it?
Lionel Brown.
Lionel Brown, right,
Okay.
right. What was his nickname?
Yeah.
Squeak?
Sweet, right, yeah.
I liked it.
But anyway, Bob Sutton wanted he wanted someone to play the saxophone, and he got this C melody saxophone, and which there's no music written for, but he gave it to me. He said, "Here, this is the way you hold your mouth," which is the embouchure. What does bouche mean? Mouth. How you hold it in your mouth. And he said, "Take it home and learn to play it." And he gave me the fingering chart. He said, "When you know how to play it, come on back and play it." Well, it was basically I played piano music, same pitch, and there came my experience on the tonette, because the D, E, F, G, A, and B on the tonette are exactly the same on the saxophone. So I knew how to play all these. All I had to do was learn how to hit the octave key and use the little fingers on the other fingerings. So after about 3 or 4 days, I went back and played my first time with them. My Adobe Hacienda.
Herb, maybe you could, something that's always puzzled me. There were so many Lakefield boys who played music and played in the orchestra and high school band, so on then, and now I know of none. And what was the reason for that? What was the encouragement you had? What was the incentive? How did that happen that it isn't happening today? Any thoughts?
I don't know. We all wanted to play in the bands. I assume that the high school has a have they got a music program here? But what are they? It's hard for the phys ed and the music people to keep a band going when you're you know the kids only take it for half a year.
Well, yeah, I'm talking about the level though. I know we have a band at high school, but all these people you mentioned, mostly have went on and played professionally with dance bands and in several different venues and several different bands. Like, what were some of the bands you played in?
Well, one of the big things was the encouragement. You have to understand that both Mr. Sloan and Mr. Sutton encouraged us to play, and whenever they, see us and talk to us, they'd say, "How are you coming on?" And they pushed us at it. I don't know whether there's too many of them pushing it now, but anyway, in 1946, I was playing. I got an alto sax. I still have it, and Lionel Brown got me playing with Jim Black and his Red River Ramblers, and that was it was a good band. It was a round and square dance, what they call country now, and we played at Brookside Pavilion, and of course with all the army people coming back and that there was lots of fights to see and things like that. But then Teddy Everett came along, and that's when John started playing, and Charlie Ridpath and Gordy Blake played in that band. John Peel, Greg, Jack Chittick, a fellow from Warkworth by the name of Jack Peters played piano, and Ted Everett ran it. Now, we had played in bands before. The high school had the little band, and we used to go and play. We'd play at Warsaw, and we got $2.50 a night each. That's big money, boy, I'll tell you right now. Oh, the picture back there, Teddy Everett's band, and we've all got zoot suits on. How many remember zoot suits? Jeez, eh? I'm telling you, we really looked great with those tight cuffs and the big white knees, and well, the coats came right down to your knees. My one grandson still has the powder blue coat that I wore, and for some reason, over the years, it's shrunk.
Herb, so you're out of high school, and then you decide you'll go to further education. Where'd you go? What'd you do then?
Well, since I didn't know what to do, and Joe and I were talking, so we decided to go to Teachers College, and we actually hitchhiked down to Peterborough and went to the Teachers College every day. And we were lucky, one of the high school teachers' wife was a day nurse, so in the winter she took us down there. Although it was a little perilous driving with her, if you remember, Joel. We always fought to see who'd sit in the back seat. But anyway, we became teachers, and
how many years were you at Teachers College? Call it normal school, did they not?
It was a normal school.
Yeah.
I hesitate to use the word.
Yeah.
Anyway,
as compared to the abnormal school.
That's true. And they still have the reunion. Actually, Joe and I are going to the reunion this year. And what will it be, Joe? 61st, yeah.
What was your first school, Herb, after you got out of Teachers College?
Burley Falls.
Were you nervous when you began teaching in the first day or two?
No, there was only 19 kids there. Why would I be nervous?
Okay. None as big as you, right?
Well, yeah, there was a couple of them. There were some boys there that were in grade 8 that were 15, 16 years old, but they were really good kids. And,
well, you must have some vivid experiences there. Could you give us a few?
Oh, no. You know,
Skip this.
Well, we're talking about music. Most of the people up there at Burley Falls were somehow related. So the timbre or quality of their voices was all the same, and they were great singers. You know, that they could sing hymns and things like the Saints Go Marching In, and they would sing them in 3-part harmony. And amazing, you know, for children who were in elementary school. And there was one little girl that could chord. She came to me one day and said, "Can I play the piano?" And I said, "Sure." And here she is humping out the chords, you know, the same thing as you play for a square dance or something like that. But they're 1, 4, 5 chords for all those people that know all about music. Anyway, and that's simple blues or church music or whatever, some country music too. But one year we went in the Kiwanis Festival, and I should have brought the book. I had they gave it to me, and they're not supposed to, but the adjudicators write a report on every town that they've been to in the Kiwanis Festival, and they are not supposed to mention any one school. But the adjudicator was from England, and he mentioned how the wonderful performance of the Little Red Indians. And so they gave me the book, and I still have it. And one of these days somebody can write my memoirs.
Who was your inspector in those years?
K.O. Birkin.
K.O. Birkin, yeah.
He was a good guy.
Following there, how long did you teach in Burley? Do you recall? 1 year?
5 years, and
5 years.
then I went to Apsley for 2 years as the principal, came to Lakefield as the vice principal, and the big schwas, of course, and and I went to Oshawa.
So you come back to Lakefield, and how long were you back in Lakefield before?
It was 2 or 3 years.
And that was then that culminated with the pink listing of our school board or something of that nature. Yeah. It was a terrible upheaval among everybody had an opinion on it. Nobody was right.
I like the women teachers had their little group, and the men teachers had their little group, and they bickered between them. And I told them, because, you know, I was in the Lions Club with all those guys that were on the school board, and there was no way the Teachers Federation was going to win against those guys. You know, Jack Chittick and Harlan Hamlin and all those guys, wonderful businessmen, and they just, the Teachers Federation didn't have a chance. I'll tell you that right now. And I knew that, and so I just decided, even though we just built the house up here, that we were gone, and I made arrangements. This will be I'll tell you what schools were like and what school boards were like. I went to Oshawa, and they said they'd hire me, and I said, well, my wife wants to teach too, and they said, no, we don't hire people that are married. And I said, well, I'll go to Whitby, because I knew Freddie Ain there, and he lived up on the lake, and he was a member of the school board, so I knew I could get a job there. Anyway, they phoned in the middle of the week and said, bring your wife up, and they hired us. And so we were the first man and wife that was ever hired in Oshawa.
Yeah. That leads us, incidentally, is there any chance we get those board members back? No. Well, that leads us to another
I know,
segment.
Yeah, let's not get into that.
No, okay, no, and we shan't. I wanted to, it must have been a real change to you going from Lakefield to Oshawa. Like, I mean, a slightly bigger city, slightly different average income. What school did you teach in down there?
Well, the first year they stuck me in the South End, and all the kids had thought the rumor went around that I had come from the detention school in Bowmanville, which was untrue. But anyway, I taught a grade 8 class, and that's where I had the 4-part choir, and they won the Kiwanis Festival down there, and then of course everybody was after me to go and teach, and I wound up in the high schools. And first off, I had to. I was at Donovan Collegiate, and there weren't enough minutes, so I taught at Donovan in the morning, and I taught at 3 elementary schools in the afternoon.
Taught music?
Yeah, all instrumental music.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And you had to go around to the high schools and scrounge instruments, because the board, it was brand new. The board never had any instrumental music in the elementary schools.
You began it, more or less?
Yeah, I started the first instrumental music class at a place called Cannon School now. It's Cannon School now. It's the senior public school.
Yeah. Yeah. So how successful was your band down there?
Well, they didn't have any section for the elementary school, so we went in the intermediate, grade 10 and under, and of course we won.
Ho hum.
Then I taught at Donovan Collegiate for 3 years. I went to Central for 11, and after that they saw fit to retire me as a music consultant for the Durham region, and I was in charge of, at that time there were 80 elementary schools and 14 high schools. So I looked after all of the instrumental music for the Durham region and did things like, well, it was like semi-retirement. If I wanted to sneak away for a day, I could. But, you know, looking after the instruments that the board should provide for the schools, and making up, you know, courses of study and things like that.
How'd you finance that? Sell donuts or coffee or stuff like that?
Finance what?
Finance the band. How'd you?
Which band are we talking about now?
Well, the one that did all the traveling. You went to won 4 Canadian
Oh,
championships.
that was the Central Band, and it all started because Brother Greg, of course, sibling rivalry, and he, about 1980, he had a Dixieland band that won the Canadian championship, and he wouldn't shut his mouth about it at the Marina over the summer. So I went back and said to the guys, we want a Dixieland band here, and I need 8 people, so Greg never won again.
And you won 4 years in a row?
Yeah, 4 years in a row.
Yeah. And you take your water and I'm
getting dry.
good. You also mentioned that one of your bands was chosen for a special honor to give a concert somewhere. Would you just tell us a little bit about that?
That was 1981 in the old Canadian Stage Band Festival. They had a section, they don't have it anymore, it's called Music Fest Canada, but they had a section for big bands to play nostalgia, you know, music like Tommy Dorsey, Getting Sentimental Over You, you know, Les Brown, and stuff like that. So we went in it in Peterborough and we won. And the guy that ran the festival, maybe it was because I knew him, but he used to come up and he had a big carver, and he'd come up and take all my gas, which was good. I'm talking about petrol. And anyway, I used to take that band up to the pavilion and play the opening dance on the 1st of July, and all the students were billeted in the houses or the cottages of their houses that all up there now. But anyway, in 1980, I think it was 80 or 81, we won the nostalgia section, and they invited one band from Canada every year to play an hour concert. So it was in Edmonton, and I already had a Dixieland band and a jazz combo going, which was most of the students that played in that dance band. And so we added a few more, and we went and we played for an hour. And of course, music is heavy, so we only took enough music to play for the hour and a couple of encores. We ran out of encores. And we still have well, it'll be a VHS of it, but they used to put on a program every year, an hour program, and they used the Central Music, In the Mood, and what was the other one? For the talk.
No more. I'm getting romantic. That's enough.
They were talk for they were used as the talkovers for this TV program.
Yeah, we've Herb. You've given us great insight to some of your achievements, and really, it's quite obvious without Herb even mentioning it that he had some talent and some love and some interest in teaching children and in teaching music, because these things just didn't happen by accident, and they just didn't happen to happen to his school. So Herb, that was a wonderful achievement, and we're very proud of you. Everybody in Lakefield feels some identity and some closeness to the lakes up above us. Catchewana to some degree, and certainly Clear Lake, but the most beautiful lake in our Kawarth is, in my opinion, and many other people, Stony Lake. And you have a lot of experience in there, and I want to talk about that now with you. And I want you to share that with us.
Just a minute, before we get off the music. Don't forget.
Who's doing these questions?
If you're looking for a band, you know, John and I still play in a trio, and I have a Dixieland band, and I play in a big band, and in a blues band, and then we have kind of a party band, but we won't get into that. Okay.
Okay, so there he goes. And so if you want a band, there's your band. Okay, Herbie, we're going to talk about Stony Lake now. What connection? How come you were connected to Stony Lake? What do you have some in up there or something?
Well, My grandfather Lennox bought Belvedere Hotel, and there's some argument about the date, but he used to say 1905, and some people say 1907, and I'm not sure when it is, and I don't care one way or another. I wasn't around at the time, and they were very successful, and of course the Islanda and some of the other boats used to come up there and bring the people that stayed at the hotel. A lot of them came by boat, and if you'll remember, the old railroad tracks used to go right out onto the dock, and people got off, would come from Toronto or various places and get off and get on the steamboat and come up to the landing there.
So this was at Crow's Landing. Was there a government wharf there, a government dock?
Yeah, there was one, and then they built another one because there were two big steamers that sometimes stayed there overnight, way back. Yeah.
And did you mentioned your grandfather, he was from Lakefield, that was Bob Lennox?
Yep, that's R.J. the first.
And so at one time, I believe I heard he had a business in Lakefield, did he not?
Yeah, he did, and he and another guy sold furnitures over here, about where the old Porter, next to the old Porter store there. And grandfather was a delivery man, and they delivered mostly the pump organs and Singer sewing machines. And he went away delivering one time, and when he came back, his partner had absconded with all the money. So grandfather always said a partnership is a poor ship to sail in. But anyway, after they got that, and that's one reason, if you read in the book about Lakefield, that the old house that we're here in 24 Dean Street was in my grandmother's name and not in my grandfather's, so that they couldn't take the house away from them. And then they bought up at Stony Lake and stayed at 24 Dean Street all winter, and then went up in the summer and worked at the hotel there.
And your mom, being a daughter, she worked at the resort for them.
Oh yeah, she worked there all the time, and then in the winter she worked at fairs. If you remember fairs, she would work there, you know, in the Christmas rush and things like that.
Herb, how old were you when you first started going to Stony Lake?
I was 6 months old.
Just a swaddling babe.
Well, I guess I was there the year before, too.
Yeah. Yeah. So Herb has been there. He's been at Stony Lake and had knowledge and experience of Stony Lake since he was 6 months old. Yeah. Your grandpa, and then what type of clientele? Who were your clientele?
Oh, they came from all over, but a lot of them came, as I say, came up on the steamer.
Okay, so you come to Lakefield by train, I suppose?
Yeah, that was CNR. And way back, they used to send Coca-Cola from Toronto on the steamer, and it would come up from Toronto. Coca-Cola had all flavors in those days. I don't know, do you remember? Raise your hand if you remember, and I'll know how old you are. Anyway, they had you know, ginger ale and orange and all that, and they would send them up. And the other thing was we got Nielsen's ice cream. The only two flavors were chocolate and vanilla. And they came on the steamer in these great big bags that had ice in them, and you put a layer of ice in, and then you put a layer of salt, and a layer of ice and salt, and that kept it on the train from Toronto to Lakefield, and then by the steamship up. And grandfather used to go down with the wheelbarrow and wheel it all up from the dock.
Herb, how many guests would your grandfather's hotel, roughly, how many could keep?
Oh, geez, I can't. There was a big annex that burned down at the back that would hold about 40 people. And, you know, it was full. And it had a big attic in it that there were a whole bunch of young fellows that used to come and stay there every week. And then there was a dance in the pavilion, and Jack Marshall played the piano, and they had a drummer, and I always remember the drummer had the drum with a mountain scene. They had to have a mountain scene on the drums in those days. And
So,
there was a guy from Peterborough that played the violin. So it was piano, drums, and violin, and they provided the music. And I always remember, like, Andy's uncle and a bunch of them would come, and they'd be all dressed up. The ladies wore long dresses and high heels, and the men were all dressed up with their navy jackets or black jackets and white pants and the two-tone shoes and all that.
what era was this, or what year roughly?
Oh, that's way back. I can remember way back in 35 and 36, because we used to stand out in the balcony and watch them coming up, and then they did, the next day they would have church there. But,
Did you serve meals in the hotel?
Oh yeah.
And so most of your guests would be there for the full fare, right?
Yeah. My grandmother was Grandma Lennox was noted for her pies, and she was Kate Darling, and of course from all the Darlings in around Warsaw. Although my grandfather always said there was nothing but pains and aches in Warsaw.
So your grandmother was a darling?
She was a sweetheart, yes.
Certainly, your grandfather certainly thought so.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. And Herb, I've heard they had regattas up there. Did they have regattas?
Oh yeah, the regatta at Crow's Landing is over 100 years old. And of course we all paddled in the Second World War. There wasn't any gas, so everybody either rowed a boat or paddled. So you know, everybody became good paddlers. And I wasn't much for rowing a boat, I'll tell you. But before they had outboard motors, Grandpa Lennox, if someone needed to be taxied over to an island, Grandpa Lennox used to roll them over in a boat. He was a big, strong man. He could carry 100 of pounds of potatoes in each arm. He just walked along with them.
Well, those boats were quite popular. They're called skiffs, weren't they? The ones
that is correct.
Yeah, they were quite popular around here in those days. And so, did you participate in the regattas?
Oh yeah.
And when were they held?
That's always on the first Saturday of the civic holiday weekend, whenever that is. You know, but the civic holiday weekend is the first Monday in August.
And Stony Lake was a really, really recreational, fun, pleasant place to be. And there was other centers around there. Like, did you ever dance over at Biomead or Juniper?
Oh yeah.
Or did you ever get down to McCracken's Landing?
Well, there wasn't much going on at McCracken's Landing.
I beg your pardon.
There were no dances.
Pat?
No
There's
dances
lots
anyway.
going on at McCracken's Landing, wasn't there?
The pavilion out on Juniper Island had dances, and Biomead had a beer parlor. And then they voted, Burley Township voted dry, and that dried up the beer parlor. But back to the regattas. Mother was she was a good athlete, and she won the ladies single canoe when she was 14 down at Juniper Island. I know that. We still have the little brooch that she got for that. And we used to run the boats. Remember that? We ran the boat. They had outboard races, which were kind of wild. They finally ended one year when a kid fell out and the boat was spinning around. He's holding on. Nobody could get the boat stopped. And it was in front of everybody. And it was it was really crowded. It was big. There were people came from all over the place.
Tell us about the year that the paddlers, and you tell us the paddlers were challenged by the Balmy Beach Canoe Club, which was a famous canoe club out of Toronto. Top line in Canada, were they not?
Yeah, they were supposed to be, but they didn't show very well. Jack Rourke and I paddled together, two in a canoe, and of course we were, skin and bones, and we paddled together all over the place. So we went in the races, and we did very well. And Les Crow and Clarence McEnwell got us to paddle in the four in a canoe. And funny, Les, was a big, strong guy, but he always paddled at the front. And Clarence was a good, really good paddler, but he always was at the back. And Jack and I were in the middle, and I don't know, Clarence said it was 7 years, but I don't think it was 7 years, but we were never beaten. We'd look back when we went over the finish line, and there'd be canoes a couple lengths behind us. Now, Les Crow, of course, became a very famous paddler all over Canada, and was a great friend, and he was a good hockey player too. Played for Warsaw.
Yeah.
Sawhorse.
Yeah, Les was a relative of ours, of our family.
They're all related up there.
Yeah. So you had big crowds at these regattas, huh?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And when would the one in Juniper be? The same weekend or following weekend, or?
It was on the Monday, and the Bluets had a marina up on Chemung Lake, and they used to put all the canoes and the sailboats and everything in a line, and they had a tug, and they would pull them all down through Buckhorn and Burley Falls, and they'd be there, and they'd camp out for the weekend and come to the two regattas. Now sometimes there was a regatta at I'll be back in a minute.
We used to have regattas here in Lakeville, and they were an annual thing also until they really petered out about shortly after the Second World War. But we had them for years and years and years, and Chubby Blewett was a famous paddler from Lakeville.
Yeah, Chubby, according to what I heard, Chubby could beat old Mr. Bloomfield. And Reg Bloomfield, and of course his father was Squire Bloomfield, and Squire Bloomfield built the house that's now the funeral home.
Oh.
And Reg was around and paddled all his life in Lakefield, and then he had a place over by Hills Creek on the north shore of Stony Lake. And an amazing old man, I'll tell you. He had a sailboat that the tippiest canoe that I've ever paddled, and he had a sail on the front and a sail on the back, and he'd go in the sailing races, and he would beat the real sailboats. It was an amazing man, and he must have been 70 years old. I don't really remember this or not, and he had a grandson. And he went in the two in a canoe race with his grandson, so he was basically doing all the paddling. The kid had a little paddle, and he came in second. Amazing man. And
I remember the demonstrations.
Oh yeah.
Empty the canoe up over.
Yeah. He could do all that. Tip the canoe over, flip it up in the air, and it would land. He'd land in the water, but the canoe would land back right side up, and would hardly have any water in it at all. And then he'd fill the canoe with water, and he'd push all the water out of it. He was an amazing old gentleman. I'll tell you, I can remember him. He left the canoe. He used to leave the canoe behind the boathouse, and he would come up on Friday, and the waves would just be rolling, and he'd fill the canoe full of food, Mrs. Bloomfield, and what was the old lady, the daughter that smoked what was her name? And she, what I remember is she had one of those cigarette things that she, you know, looked about this long. Anyway, I'll think of her name, but anyway, he would paddle across the lake, and the waves would be rolling 3 feet, and he'd still be going. And I'll tell you, we tried, you know, being kids, we tried that canoe. We put it in the water, and you had to be careful. And we knew canoes pretty well, but that canoe was the tippiest thing in the world.
Yeah. Susan, I believe getting on the canoes that at one time your dad or your family had a black and white film of canoeing and stunts and so on. Do you recollect anything of that?
Yeah, because I copied it to the library years ago.
I know I saw it one weekend of years ago when they.
Like he had canoes like shoes, and he would walk on the water in that film.
It was a 16mm movie in the Lakefield Library.
Yeah,
They copied it.
I don't know where Dad got the original, but he copied it to the library.
I see. Be wonderful, because it was amazing what they could do. Yeah. Well, really, Herb.
One more thing.
Yeah.
Going back to Clarence McElwell, Clarence lived just up around the corner there, and he, you know, he came down every week and he taught paddling, and he had a team that paddled, and they went all over, and they were never beaten. You know, Clarence was a wonderful teacher, and Les Crow took over after that, and now Len Mindy has taken over after Les. But a little story, my son Randy paddled in that bunch, and he had all these trophies, and they were in his room up at in the big old hotel with 13 rooms, and in the spring my mother used to have one of the Salter girls come up and do the house cleaning for, you know, she'd be there 3 or 4 days. So the one day they were having lunch, and all of Salter said, whose room was that has all the trophies? And Mother said, oh, that's Randy's. And she said, what did you get them for? Oh, paddling. And she said, did anybody else ever win?
Yeah. Looking back, Herb, would you say Lakefield was a good place to grow up in?
Couldn't be better.
Best you ever grew up in, eh?
When you think about the fun that we had, everything we did, and we were centered around the arena in the wintertime. And a lot of good hockey players came from Lakefield, but of course the star was Mr. Montgomery, right there. The one
He
we
certainly
called
was,
Fun.
that's for sure.
Yeah. I remember you playing, what was it, Intermediate C when you were 14 or thereabouts, you know?
Senior B.
Was it B?
Well, if that's what the Peaks were, that's what it was.
Yeah, oh, yeah, I know.
And Brock Arena,
Yeah.
where you played them.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, the Brock Arena was owned by the Sheehy's, and my dad worked for them in the winter, and every spring they used to put in a dance floor, and they had dancing there, and that's how it became a dance hall.
Oh.
And what is it now? It's not, it was.
It's a supermarket now.
Supermarket,
Yeah. I've asked Herb, I've asked every question I could think of, and you volunteered answers to some things I couldn't even think of, and we've enjoyed every moment of it. I'd like to ask, how many of you people, put up your hands, have danced to Herb and his band music?
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah. How many of you have never heard Herb play? Well, we're going to have a treat for you. You've never heard Herb play, do you? We are going to have a treat for you because Herb has brought an instrument and he's going to play a couple tunes of his choice, and then we'll have a very brief period of questions that you would like to ask of Herb, and then we'll get at the coffee and the cookies. And Herb, it's been great talking with you. I'm sorry I interrupted you, but we only had tonight, you know.
There's always other
Yes.
things. Anyway.
Thank you.
Okay, this is a clarinet. And probably one of the harder instruments to play, basically because it doesn't overblow at an octave, which is 8 notes. A clarinet overblows at a 12th. So there are, instead of on a saxophone, if you have 3 fingers there, 6 fingers down, you're playing a D. And if you put the octave key on, you're still playing a D, only an octave higher. On a clarinet, that doesn't work. So if any of your grandchildren play a clarinet, they have to learn all different fingerings for different letters of the musical alphabet. And I haven't been playing very much because I had an infection in my throat. So you'll have to put up with me if I squeak. And this is a Selmer clarinet, and it's tuned to B flat. And that's your lesson for the day. What'll I play? How about a little Gershwin? Name that tune. Yes, I did. That's a little introduction.
Stranger on the Shore.
Stranger on the Shore, yeah. 1958. Okay, let me see. All right, John, get them in a little groove. You gotta, don't clap too loud. How about, everybody? 1, 2. There we go. You ready? There's if I play a little F, then if a different finger, and then, and let me see. Height, that's as high as I can play today. Sometimes can play as high as Benny, but All right. Put it away.
Put it on your way.
Yeah. It's her. You gotta turn it on.
Doesn't work here. Herb, that was wonderful, and I would like everyone to help me to thank Herb for his talk and music tonight.
Thank you.
You'd be interested to know that we tape all of our presentations of the Historical Society, and as a matter of interest, we just converted all the old tapes to digital discs and to preserve all our old presentations over the past 25 years. And Sheila has just completed having that done. And it was considerable expense, but it will preserve all of the presentations that have been made to the Historical Society for a long, long time. And I think it's wonderful now that we have them in such a way that they will be recorded forever. And hopefully tonight you will receive a copy of your presentation. Will it be on a CD, Sheila?
DVD.
A DVD, okay. I'm a little behind.
What's a DVD? You know that I go to the music camp every year, and we have generally have 4 university students from the University of Toronto, people that are going to be music teachers. And one year we were sitting around. There's a cabin way up where they keep the beer and everything. I don't drink any beer, but I go up anyway. And we were all sitting around, and they talked about some song, and I said, well, I have that on an LP. And this girl said, what's an LP?
We know the feeling. Marg has postcards for sale, and they are here tonight, so if anyone would like to pick up another supply, I know you must be running low by now. And we have a good inventory of postcards. And I also wanted to mention that we've been really busy lately with people from all over Ontario and elsewhere. They're looking for information that we have in the historical archives. We had one lady from Midland, and she said that her dad used to work on the steamboats that left Lakefield, and when you talked about the steamboats tonight, it made me think of her. But her dad worked on the Stony Lake and the Empress and another one that I've forgotten, and she wondered, she was preparing a book for her mother's 95th birthday, and she wondered whether we had any pictures of these old steamers. And she actually drove from Midland to come down and get some pictures of some of these old boats so that she could prepare a book for her mother, and she said her mother was just going to be thrilled with this. We've had applications from students. We had a student very recently from, I believe, from Trent, and she was accompanied. She came to our house to look through our records, and she was interested in the logging industry in this area particularly. So she brought with her Dennis Edwards, and between the two of them, they amassed a great amount of information and gave us a lot of information about some of the history of Lakefield too, which we're always glad to have. And we noticed that in Herb's speech tonight, he mentioned that he had things, he had books, and he had medals, and he had trophies, and the Historical Society is certainly in need of such things. And it's unfortunate that Greg isn't a member of the Historical Society, and so we have decided to reward him tonight with a membership in the Lakefield Historical Society. And this is valid to the end of August 31st, 2013.
I hope you have us sorted out by then.
So thanks very much, everybody, for coming. We've had a very nice evening, and there's coffee and cookies. Please enjoy a chat with everyone before you leave, and we'll see you in a month. And who is up next in the meeting? Jeannie, you have the next meeting?